Good morning. It's Joyful Catholic Hermit here, trying to be joyful in oodles and oodles of pain. Bad spinal headache today, and I had just done a vlog, but it's just way too long and rambling. But maybe I'll post it at some point. Just think I need to get it more concise. But it has to do with mystical phenomenon. Somebody had asked me a question about it, and that person has studied and has terminology, which at first I thought, well, Chris, I don't like to be bothered with a lot of that, which is not good. I think I live my life a lot of not wanting to know, like with my back, just plow through, cope until I can no longer cope. But when a surgeon recently, for the first medical person who's even begun to tell me why I've had this horrible pain all these years and these awful headaches, constant headache, and then sometimes severe, is because of what happened during the rushed second surgery in which a surgeon was trying to save my life from my back surgery years ago, 1987, that the first one, something was wrong, and I died in recovery and was sent back, etc. So he rushed me back in. I knew I was going to live because God had a talk with me and sent me back, but I couldn't tell him. I couldn't speak. The pain was so great, and the cardiac arrests I was having. Because he said he didn't know if he could save me, but he would do all he could. Well, in that rushing, things happened that caused a condition. Now I know the name of it, arachnoiditis. And there was also a spinal fluid leak, a couple of little wrong cuts. And I can't blame the surgeon. He was doing his best and had to rush. Felt he did. He didn't know what God had let me know. And as it turns out anyway, the whole thing was ordained in advance and foretold me that I hadn't remembered until I looked back over a journal and saw that I'd had a waking, what I now know is called a waking vision. So labels and diagnoses, symptoms, I realize are a good thing to know and to share. So this person was getting a pressure in this area of the head connected with contemplative prayer. And I'd never really thought about it. I mean, I knew there was a connection for me, but I didn't connect it with contemplative prayer. And I don't much, even in my own life, think about it much. I guess I just pray and let the Holy Spirit do the rest. I mean, I offer myself, and at times I don't even, the Lord knows, if I'm dealing with all this medical stuff and doctoring and having to do all that, change my bandage for now my skin cancer biopsy spot, and we'll probably have some skin cancer surgery coming up, which just came up as a fluke. I didn't know. That sometimes we don't feel like we have time just to spend 2 hours with the idea of that we're going to offer that to the Lord as time for prayer. But that's good if we can. It's an ideal. I used to be able to do more of that. But even with the pain that I'm having now, it's this terrible pain between my stenosis issues and the other damage done all these years ago, that when I'm in pain, it's at the point now where just to keep my sanity, I need to distract, like with something on internet, a program, or something mindless even, or a news video, or whatever. Because if I don't have that, it's like I can't manage the pain psychologically, or even fall asleep. British voices tend to, so like some British program, detective, whatever, mindless, their voices will help put me to sleep. Maybe the scenery, I don't know. I just have to trust that the Lord understands. And that maybe my suffering is sufficient, But I'm trying again now to get back into some reading, but it's just so hard to read when you have a terrible headache, or the pain is so distracting in itself. So we just do our best. But I do think this person has brought up a good point and a correction for me, something that I need to correct in myself, and that is of the value of diagnoses and symptoms. They're helpful to other people who might have these sensations and wonder, well, what is that? So the person was asking, are there physiological or physical manifestations that go along of the body that go along with mystical phenomenon? And yes, there are. Yes, there are. And I think, though, maybe I should write about them or discuss this at another time, but pressure in this area, I've had off and on for years. I just hadn't thought about it until this person, who I think is really a very holy person, and I think recently accepted the call to be a hermit, is now a hermit of Jesus, and but also has had the phenomenon of that goes with contemplative prayer, of prayer of quiet, or I forget, she had a different terminology for it, which I realize is good to have these terminology. Teresa of Avila tries to describe the phases of coming into more union with God, or the unitive way finally, and calls them by mansions and numbers them. And I think this other person and myself would agree. The point is not to get caught up in that. In the once we know what it is, because we move in and out of all these levels and phases at the will of God and the movement of the Holy Spirit. They don't always just go in a certain order, or once you're at one level, you'll only go to the next level. Then you can go way back to the beginning. John of the Cross explains that with even purgation of the senses. We may think, oh, well, our exterior senses are purged, we're detached, whatever. And maybe like St. Alphonsus Liguori at the end of his life, he got into a deep depression, was sort of back at a need for a mental purgation. was we can just get, it's just all up to God and the Holy Spirit, in other words, and including spine issues. Things can happen. One day I can be a little better. The other day, like last night, my left leg started going numb on me again. So I'll talk about more of this later when I'm a little bit more with it. But yeah, I think it's good. I think I'm going to start sharing, because I've been praying, about my writing. I know the Lord wants me to write or to share, and so I need to try to get it into some more concise form. Even with this, there's energy, great energy of the Holy Spirit. Spirit is energy and fire, and sometimes, like if that's going on, a wall will pop like it's going to explode. across the room, wherever this part of my head, or sometimes the top part of the head. The Holy Spirit at death comes out of the top of our head. When we're born, this is all open, so there's significance here. Everything's related physiologically with the mystical, all of our states of life, the temporal and the spiritual while we're on earth are all connected, cause and effect, etc. Teresa of Avila, when she had her mystical ecstasies, wrote how it was actually physiologically hard on her body. It takes you down. Well, obviously, your blood pressure drops to practically nothing. Your heart rate is barely discernible, if so. One time I found out later it was a medical doctor who happened to be at Mass visiting where I was before, and I was in my state, and he was going at it. He got his fingers so down in trying to find a pulse in my jugular that it left big finger marks the next day. For a couple of days I had these big red finger marks deep in my neck, and he couldn't find a pulse. He was alarmed till some friends said, no, she's having this mystical state, don't worry. And but none of these states or anything you ask for or want for, this other person knows all this. They're gifts. They just come, they go. It's all up to God, up to the Holy Spirit. And trust me, though, even though, like when I'm in the ecstasy during Mass, it can be very good, bliss. I don't feel any pain in that state, but afterwards I do. There's a physiological reaction because sitting for me is very, very bad. Not necessarily for the stenosis, but for my other pain. And I'll have worse pain then. Pain siege will come sooner if I sit an hour or longer in Mass without any movement, because you lose faculty over your body. Even though I don't feel pain then, I will later. We have our bodies, we're in them. So there's going to be manifestations of physical this and that with mystical phenomenon. And it has an effect. So, and it also has a other effect, and it also can be something that can be a temptation for us. The devil's also involved in all of this stuff, trying to get us hung up on things or wondering more, just like the devil can do that with my pain and was doing with me, getting me too focused on well, any moment, I could lose continence or lose mobility, and then what? And it could be permanent. And one PA had sort of frightened me a little bit with that, which was what her job is. I mean, if I do have symptoms, I got to get to ER, they say, but now that my bone density isn't maybe good enough, I don't know. That's from another PA, not from the surgeon. But anyway, we just have to let God handle matters. But knowing about what's going on could be good, and it was very helpful to me when the Lord showed me a book on my own shelf that I hadn't realized would have all this information in it. It's like 10 years ago when I was first started having these mystical ecstasies during Mass. And he showed it to me in a waking vision. I went back, sure enough, it was right there, right where I was shown it would be. The book with the title he showed, started reading it, and it explained everything. And even stuff that I don't have happen, but at least it explained the whole process so that I would not be concerned. And I could get the symptoms out of my mind and just live seeking and loving the Lord and trying my best to love others. We all know sometimes, it does. It takes a personal effort and a desire. Loving ourselves and loving others seems to be more more difficult than love of God in himself, at least to me, because we human beings are tricky. We're tricky. God bless his real presence in us. And I'm very grateful to this person who asked the question and got me thinking about how, yes, understanding the physiological aspects and other aspects in describing mystical phenomenon can be helpful, because we human beings, some of us will have some and some others, and just like with my spine diagnosis, it's good to know what's going on and how to deal with it, what to do about it. God bless his real presence in us.